1, 2, 3. A Zach DeWolf's video for thee.
Hey guys, it's Zach here, and today I've got a brand new tutorial for you. This is one people have been requesting a lot lately, and that's probably due to the fact I've changed and updated the way I make my masks, mainly the snouts and ears. And I did make a quick short tutorial for how to make the snouts, but of course shorts have a 3-minute limit, and I wasn't able to include everything I wanted to. Plus, some people found it very confusing, so I decided to do a more in-depth tutorial on the snouts so you guys can understand a little better. And while I'm at it, why not do the ears too? Let's get into it! For this tutorial, you're going to need these materials. A blank cat mask. Both paper and plastic masks will work. After that, we're going to need cardboard. I find that thin cardboard works the best, but make sure it's still very sturdy and durable. If you have any Amazon boxes laying around your house, their cardboard works amazingly. But of course, any cardboard will do. You'll also need some hot glue sticks. In this case, I like to use mini hot glue sticks, but any size glue sticks will work too. And of course, you're gonna need a hot glue gun. If you're going out and buying one for this craft, make sure it's the right size and compatible with your hot glue sticks. Then you're going to need a pencil or something else to draw on your mask with. I personally feel a pencil works best, but anything will do. I forgot to mention it here, but you'll also need some scissors and some paper. And now we can get started. Okay, so this first step is completely optional, but because my masks always have these big circular eyes 90% of the time, I decided to take one of my blank cat masks and cut out the same eyes I always do. But instead of making it into one of my normal masks, I use it to layer over whatever base I'm working on, and then I use it as a template to draw the eyes on. That way I can get them symmetrical and pretty much the same size every time. It's a pretty neat little trick, and I highly recommend it if you're making a lot of masks with the exact same eye shape. You will have to sacrifice a cat mask base, but I truly think it's worth it because it really does save me so much time trying to make these symmetrical eyes. If you decide to do this though, I recommend drawing your eyes on your template a little bit bigger than you would on your mask, because when you cut it out and trace it, it kind of shrinks a little bit. And here's what it looks like when I'm done. Alright, now to the real step one. The first thing we need to do to make our snout is to give it a ledge to be glued on. Some people prefer to cut it after they've glued their snout on. Some people don't even really cut off the snout at all and just glue the new snout over top of it. And while yes, you can do that, for a more professional and clean and tidy finish, I do recommend cutting off the snout beforehand. It makes your mask more professional looking, and lining will be an issue if you don't. And I also personally feel cutting it off beforehand is much easier than trying to cut it off with a snout already attached. Also, it's important to note that when you draw on where you're going to cut the snout off, be sure to leave half of it still attached to your mask. If you don't do that, it will be nearly impossible to glue on the muzzle in a way that looks good. I recommend starting your line at the end of the nose and going from there. And the last thing we're going to do is draw a small line where your nose ends going into the ledge. Now, before we cut off the muzzle, since we already got our pencil, let's go ahead and draw the lines on the ears. Later on in this tutorial, when we glue our new cardboard ears on, we'll glue them directly to these ears. I can almost guarantee you've seen another mask maker glue the ears directly onto the old ones, but it's always kind of bugged me that you can clearly see the old ears glued on top of the new ears straight through the felt. But if I don't do that, I have to cut the whole segment of the ear out and then fill it in with cardboard and all this other crap, and it just takes way too long for me to want to do that. So here's the quick solution I found to have best of both worlds. You're gonna go ahead and take your pencil and draw on 3 lines on each ear. 1 directly in the middle on the tip of the ear, and 2 on each side of the middle of the ear. Once you have that, it's time to cut everything out. To start out, we're going to take our scissors and cut along those lines on the ears we just made. Be careful not to go too far and overcut. You should really only be cutting on the flat part of the ear. Once you start to go into the curve, it's time to stop. Alright, before we finish the ears, let's cut off the snout. But don't worry, in just a second I'll show you how those ears are gonna work. Also, sorry if you can hear my cat purring throughout this video. He's like sitting on my arm and purring loudly. Once you reach the nose with your scissors, be super careful. It's like one of the hardest parts to cut on the entire mask because it's a little thicker there. So just be careful, because you can end up like squishing, bending, or even cutting the wrong way if you're not careful. Alrighty, the next part is cutting out the eyes. Of course, if you aren't expanding your eyes, don't worry about this. For the most part, you just cut out the eyes like you would any other part of the mask, but there is one specific trick I learned for those little tricky angles. We're gonna line the tip of our scissors along the line we're gonna cut, no farther, and then squeeze the handle with our other hand to press through. And then you can go around the whole thing in small little snips. You can use this if there's a weird angle where you can't quite get it, or if it's just being difficult and the scissors won't cut through. This trick works amazing. That's pretty much all you need to know about cutting out bigger eyes, so I'm just gonna do a time lapse because this part's optional anyway. Alrighty, all done with the eyes. Which means the only thing left to do is to cut that tiny little cut right on the edge of that snout. Okay, all the prep work's done. Now we can actually go ahead and make the snout, you know, what the tutorial is for. Start out by taking a piece of cardboard and folding it directly in half so it's a rectangle. After that, feel free to copy these lines that I'm drawing onto the cardboard right now. These are the lines we're gonna cut across. You don't really need an exact pattern, it just needs to look roughly like this. I don't use a pattern for myself, I just draw them on every single time and kinda eyeball it. If you're careful with your cutting, it should turn out fine. Once you're done, your sketch should look like this. Feel free to pause for a moment to copy down the lines. Once you've got it all down, take your folded in half piece of cardboard, start cutting along the bottom red line. Once you reach the curved segment, start curving your scissors to follow that line instead. After that, we're gonna cut along the last red line. Notice how the line doesn't fully connect to the edge. That's because we're not going to cut this piece completely off. We're just going to cut into it. Once you finish cutting along all the lines, we're gonna fold our cardboard out flat and fold that tiny little tab we just made inwards. This next part is optional but very helpful. You're going to very lightly graze your blade on top of those two little triangles that we just made. We're not cutting all the way through them, we're just cutting a tiny bit into them so folding them is a little easier. When I do this, I don't really use any pressure at all because just the slightest push can cut all the way through, and we don't want that. If you're a bit younger, make sure you get an adult to help you with this or at the very least supervise it. But if you don't have an adult with you or just want to do it on your own, bending them is completely fine. The next step is to make that tab we folded inwards into a rectangle. You can do this by pointing to the very end of where it bends and cutting a triangle off, like this. After that, the next step is to make the base for the nose bridge. I'm drawing out some red lines to help you guys visualize it, but basically we're going from the corner of that triangle we just cut out to the very end, making a very long rectangle. And after that, we're going to take our blade and lightly cut along the very first layer of cardboard, once again just making it easier to fold. And just like last time, feel free to bend this. You don't have to use the blade. After that, we're going to fold our pieces in to start getting an idea of what our snout's going to look like. Then, we're going to take our scissors and go to our triangle-shaped tabs and cut off the points. We do this so they don't overlap or bump into each other when we do this next part. It makes it more smooth. Alright, now that our cutting's done, we can get on to the next step, which is gluing and assembling. To start out, we're going to push that rectangular middle tab inwards, and we're going to apply a tiny bit of hot glue onto the bottoms of the other two tabs from the left and right of it. Then, very, very carefully, we're going to fold them in and glue them to the centered tab, like this. This part's pretty darn tricky, and if you're not careful here, you could burn yourself with the hot glue. I highly recommend you either get a parent to help you or have a little cup full of water nearby. That way, if you do accidentally burn yourself, you can dunk your fingers right into the water, so the hot glue will solidify and cool down so you don't burn yourself that bad. This next step is only necessary if you use the blade like I do. If all you did was bend your cardboard, you can skip this step altogether. But for those of you who use the blades, depending on how thin your cardboard is, you may need to take some printer paper and cover up those edges. My cardboard is like mega super duper thin, so they break all the time even when I just barely have any pressure on that blade. So to prevent this, I like to take some pieces of paper and glue them on those seams so they don't break on me. It's pretty self-explanatory, but like I said, you're basically just taking the paper and covering up every place where you cut with the blade. Make sure the paper covers both sides of where you cut. That way, if the initial cardboard does break, the paper will hold it together. Plus, paper is super thin, so it kind of really doesn't even show up once you felt it. But if you don't have paper for whatever reason, you can use cardboard, just make sure to use it on the back instead of the front so it's still smooth.
Hey guys, Zach from the future here. I realized this immediately after I finished my tutorial when I went to go actually, use this base for the mask I was planning, aka the alien canine. I realized I totally forgot to do a part on the base that I'm supposed to do. I did go ahead and fix it, but I didn't record it because I'm lazy and dumb. So instead, I'm going to draw some pictures because I'm good at that, and the part that I'm drawing really isn't that complicated or hard or anything. I mean, some people might not even want to do it, but I'm going to add it because I do it every time. Okay, so basically you're gonna take your snout, yes? Then boom, magic, another piece of cardboard. We're gonna take that tiny piece of cardboard and we're going to slip it behind the front of the muzzle, like this. You're gonna glue it in with hot glue. Maybe that's obvious, but I just thought I'd say. Then you're gonna take some red marker and you're gonna draw a little wolf mouth on it, I guess? Canine? I don't know. Anyway, you're basically just gonna then cut along those lines that you drew so it looks like a wolf mouth. Hooray, it's the part I missed and isn't in this entire video. Sorry about that, guys, but I hope you can understand. And I think you will understand and forgive me, because I had a pretty darn good excuse. I was hungry and lazy and didn't want to do it because I wanted to eat soon. Anyway, enjoy the rest of the video. Alright guys, let's do this next step, and I am 100% positive and 100% certain this is absolutely the next step we should be doing, and I totally didn't forget one. We're gonna take our snout and flip it to the backside and start rounding out the edges so it looks more like a round cave entrance or something. We do this so it's more natural looking, and also because it works really well to shape it to the right size so it can fit right on that little ledge we made on the cat mask. You'll know you're done when it looks something like this. Then we're going to flip it back to the front, and we're kind of just going to push with our thumbs on these corners to kind of make them a little more rounded. This is a bit more subtle, but I do feel it helps just a teeny tiny bit. Makes it look less boxy and a little more natural. Okay, and after all of that, we're finally ready to attach the snout to the mask. Be sure to hold it up to the spot you're going to glue it just to do a little test fit and make sure it actually fits on the mask. Then you're going to take your hot glue gun and apply a generous amount of hot glue to the center of that ledge and also a little off to the sides. And then we're going to carefully take our snout and push it onto the mask. When you do this, look at the bottom and front facing views of your mask and try to adjust it while the hot glue is still damp so it's absolutely 100% even and symmetrical. And right here you can also see where that tiny little cut we made into the ledge comes into play. See how where we cut is just ever so slightly parted when we glue down? When we do that, it helps it lay much more flat. It even makes it look just a tiny bit better when you line it. It's not much, but I think it helps. Next, we're going to fold back a tiny part of our mask and glue the remaining bit of the ledge onto the snout. Also, it helps if you only pull back the mask and not the actual snout. The snout is hard cardboard and the mask is paper and much more flexible. It'll go a lot easier for you if you just pull back the mask. Once you're done, you should have something like this. And I messed up. Maybe on purpose, maybe not, you'll never know. And I accidentally made my snout way too long. But that gives me a good excuse to show you how to fix that. Of course, if you're happy with your mask, you can just skip this. If your snout is too long, you're just gonna very carefully peel it off your mask. One of the pluses of using a paper cat mask as opposed to a plastic one is they're paper. I know that seems pretty obvious, but that means when you peel something off of it, it just takes the first layer of paper with it and keeps the mask mostly intact. Once you fully remove the snout, you can just go ahead and take some scissors and cut it down to whatever size you want. And then after that, you can pretty much just glue it on the exact same way you did before. Ta-da! Wow, it's like I didn't even mess up horribly. Hooray! But sit your butts down, ladies and gentlemen, because we're not done quite yet. In fact, it gets so much better. The first thing we're going to do to improve this mask is we're going to cut off the corners. That part's optional, I just like to. And then we're going to cut the rest of the bottom of the mask to kind of line up more with the muzzle. This is technically optional, I suppose, but it will look really bad if you don't. If your snout already matches up with this, then you can go ahead and ignore this step. Then it's definitely optional. And it wouldn't just be optional, it would be impossible, because you can't really cut something that already lines up. Alright guys, now we're getting to the good stuff. The witchcraft, the amazing secret thing that makes this little snout go from kinda okay to amazing and epic and awesome in Sigma. We're gonna take some more thin cardboard and cut out a long rectangle, and then we're gonna take that long rectangle and fold it in half. This would be kinda tricky because it's already super long and already super small, but just try your best. I mean, you can even see me here cutting it down to size because even I couldn't get it to be perfectly in half, so just make do, it'll be fine. Then, while the cardboard is still folded in half, we're gonna take our scissors and cut off some triangles to make the cardboard look forked when we fold it open. We do this for the same reason we cut that tiny little line into the ledge of the snout. It kind of just helps it fold and lay right on the mask. Once we've got that, we're going to go ahead and glue a tiny bit of hot glue on one end of this cardboard strip. This is going to be our nose bridge. We're going to go ahead and glue this piece of cardboard about 1 inch away where the snout starts. You don't want this piece to be too close to the mask. You kind of want it to be a little bit of a ramp. After that, we're going to check and see where our nose bridge naturally lays on the mask when we set it down, and then we're going to go ahead and glue it right into place. Also, keep in mind, we're only going to be gluing the part where it meets the mask. We're not going to glue anywhere under it other than that. Once you've done that, your mask should look something like this. You should have a gap where you can stick your finger in. The next step is to fill in those gaps. To do that, we're going to hold our piece of paper up to the gap, making sure the paper overlaps and goes kind of into the eye. Then we're going to flip our mask over to the back side and we're going to trace along where the eye is onto the paper. Then we're going to take our scissors and go ahead and cut off that corner, making sure to follow the red line. Then you're going to keep tracing and cutting until your piece of paper looks just like the gap you're trying to fill. Then, using the piece of paper you cut out as a template, go ahead and trace around it onto a piece of cardboard. You're going to want to do this twice so we have 2 pieces of identical cardboard. Then you're going to cut them out and glue them straight into the gaps. That way you now have a nose bridge that's one solid piece. Then after that, you're going to cut 2 long strips of cardboard like this. Then using your scissors, we're going to cut a long triangle out of them to make a point at an angle, like this. Then, with the point facing the nose bridge and the flat edge facing the eye, we're going to glue it into place. Be sure it overlaps both the snout and the mask at the same time. We do this so there's just a bit of a smoother transition from the snout to the mask. It looks a lot nicer and less jarring if you do this. And with that, your snout's done! If all you wanted to do was make a snout, you can stop right here, but if you want to have some really cool ears, I suggest you keep watching, because I'm going to show you how to do that too. Now, remember, way back in this tutorial where I had you guys cut some lines into the ears? Yeah, well, we're going to fold those tabs out now. And you're going to fold them until the ear lays almost completely flat. And those spots where there's just a corner sticking out, just fold those as flat as you can get it. If you cut another line to get it to fold flat completely, it can look really weird, and I don't really know how to describe it. I think it looks better if you just let that corner lay flat and not the rest of it. Then, using a marker or pencil, we're going to trace the outline of the ear and also some of the mask's forehead and side of cheek. By tracing some of the mask alongside with the ear, it kind of helps you visualize better how it will look once you fully attach it to the mask. I like to trace a tiny little bit on the inside to kind of give it a little bit of a ledge to be glued on, because we're not going to be gluing the ear directly on these lines. We want a bit of cardboard left over to leave as like a little bit of a ledge to put our hot glue. This part isn't 100% necessary, but I feel it really helps it look as best as it can. Remember, this part's not going to be visible when the mask's done. It's going behind the mask, so it'll be more on the inside. After that, we're going to start sketching out what we want our ear to look like. There's no real right or wrong way to do this, and it can vary by species. I kind of just like to scribble and sketch until I think it looks good. Then, once you've got an ear you're happy with, put another piece of cardboard behind it so you can cut out 2 at the same time and cut out your ear. Now, as you can see here, we can kind of line up and check to see what it's going to look like when we actually glue it to the mask. Note how the purple part of the ear doesn't actually show up like I said, it's just supposed to go behind so you kind of have a spot to glue the ear on. If you don't leave that little purple ledge and you just try and glue it on with the normal ear you sketched out, it'll kind of look shorter because you're kind of using up that cardboard behind the mask. As you can see me doing here, we're just adding some hot glue onto that purple part, and then we're going to glue it directly onto the back of the mask. And then you're going to go ahead and do the exact same thing with the other ear. And when you're done, it should look something like this. Pretty cool, huh? Well, now we got to make it even cooler because we have to make the ears more 3D. Take another piece of scrap cardboard and line up your new ear on top of it. We don't need to trace over the entire ear, I just like to do the first half of the ear and then a little over the top so we kind of have a little curve there. Then using a marker, we're going to sketch out where the fold of our ear is going to go. Same thing as the last ear, just sketch until it looks good, and then you're going to put 2 pieces of cardboard together and cut them out both at the same time. Then to attach it, we're going to apply a line of hot glue to the edge that lines up with the ear and glue it on. Now remember not to glue it flat, we want it to be 3-dimensional. And once it's dry, we're going to do the same thing to the other side. And the last thing to do is to glue the bottom of the ear fold onto the mask. You can do this just by carefully lifting it up and applying a tiny bit of hot glue underneath, and then pressing down. And once it's dry, your mask base is done. Look at that. This base type can be used to make canines such as foxes or dogs, wolves. You could also shorten the snout to make it a feline snout with some more depth, or if you wanted, you could even round out the ears to make it into a bear or maybe even a tiger or other type of big cat. I used this exact base to make this alien mask, but with some slight alterations it could be a hyena, a feline, or you could even modify the ears to make a border collie. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this tutorial, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!